The explosion ripped through the cul-de-sac like a thunderclap. Glass rained down, car alarms screamed. And in the middle of it all, a man in tactical gear stumbled out of the smoke, blood on his sleeve, shouting something I couldn't hear. My wife was on the porch, frozen, her coffee cup shattered at her feet. I remember thinking, this can't be real. Then I saw the patch on the man's vest. SWAT. But there was no operation schedule in our neighborhood. No reason for a team to be here. And the way they moved, it wasn't right. Sloppy, aggressive, like they were acting. One of them pointed his weapon toward our window. I dragged my wife down just before the glass exploded. Every second felt like an eternity. Someone outside yelled, "Get the targets." My blood went cold. Targets. Who the hell were they talking about? That's when my wife crawled toward the hall closet, where she kept her old U.S. Marshal badge. She looked at me and whispered, "They're not cops." And she was right. What happened next exposed everything the HOA had been hiding. The lies, the money, the power. And before the night ended, someone would die. If you think you've seen HOA horror stories before, you haven't seen this. Before that night, our street looked like a brochure for the American dream. Perfect lawns, polished driveways, flags on every porch, kids on bikes, and the HOA, our beloved homeowners association, keeping it all spotless and controlled. I used to think that meant safety, that rules meant order. I was wrong. My name's Mark, and if you've ever lived under a strict HOA, you already know what I mean. They smile at meetings, send friendly reminders, and fine you if your trash can is visible for more than 10 minutes. I thought it was harmless. My wife, Julia, she never trusted them. She used to say, control is just another form of fear, Mark. I laughed it off. That week, something shifted. It started small. A new rule about unregistered vehicles. Then a notice about noise violations that made no sense. We started receiving letters that weren't signed. Just printed messages slid under our door at night. Julia said it felt like surveillance. I told her she was paranoid. One morning, I found our mailbox open. The lock snapped. Inside was a photo of me taking out the trash, time-stamped at 10:04 p.m. The note said, "HOA sees you." I showed it to the president, Mr. Crowley. He smiled too easily, said it was probably a prank. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, like he knew exactly who sent it. That night, Julia stayed up late, watching the window. The streetlights flickered. A dark SUV slowed down in front of our house, then drove off. No plates. I tried to sleep, but something about the silence felt staged, like the calm before a gunshot. Every few minutes, I heard soft clicks, cameras maybe, or phones. When I stepped outside, nothing, just the faint smell of gasoline. Coming up, you'll see how the HOA turned our peace into a prison. But before that, you need to understand, the real nightmare wasn't the fake SWAT. It was how easily everyone believed it. Julia whispered that night, "Mark, they're watching us." I laughed, but when the streetlight across from our house went out, and another camera flash sparked in the dark, I stopped laughing. Next morning, the HOA called an emergency neighborhood meeting, and that's when everything began to unravel. Who called it? And why did they lock the doors once we were all inside? The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp. The email came from the HOA board, signed by administration, not by any person's name. That alone felt wrong. Usually, Mr. Crowley, the HOA president, took every chance to remind us of his authority. But this time, his name wasn't anywhere. When we arrived at the community center, the air was heavy. Neighbors whispered in corners, avoiding eye contact. I saw familiar faces, people who used to wave when I mowed the lawn. Now they looked through me. Julia squeezed my hand. Her instincts were sharp, sharper than mine. "Don't say much," she whispered. "Just listen." The doors closed behind us. I heard a metallic click. Someone locked them from the inside. A dull hum of the old air conditioner filled the silence. The lights buzzed above us, flickering like dying stars. Mr. Crowley stood at the front of the room with 2 board members, a man I didn't know, and a woman named Lynn who usually handled landscaping budgets. But this time, she wore a black blazer and an expression that didn't belong in a neighborhood meeting. Crowley cleared his throat. "We've had a breach of trust in our community." His voice was low, trembling with restrained anger. "Certain residents have violated the covenant, They've disrespected the rules, and they will be dealt with. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Julia's hand tightened on mine. She leaned close, whispering, "They're not talking about trash cans, Mark." Crowley continued, "As of this week, the HOA has authorized a new security protocol. You will see increased patrols, more cameras, and unannounced inspections." I raised my hand. Inspections of what? Crowley's eyes locked on mine. Homes, vehicles, digital communications if necessary. I laughed. Too loud. "You can't do that. That's illegal." The unknown man stepped forward. His build was military. "Posture perfect, Mr. Walker," he said. "This community voted for full compliance. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." Julia muttered, "That line's older than fascism." Crowley ignored her. "Some residents have been undermining our operations, leaking information, spreading rumors." He paused, scanning the room. "We know who they are." A chill moved through the crowd like a shared heartbeat. My neighbor, Susan, raised her hand nervously. "Operations? What are you talking about?" Crowley smiled. "You'll see soon enough." Then he gestured to the projector. The lights dimmed. On the screen appeared images, grainy surveillance stills. Cars parked at night, people entering garages, faces half-lit by flashlights. And there, right there, was us. Julie and me, sitting on our porch, time-stamped 11:43 p.m. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Crowley said calmly, "This is what happens when order is challenged." I stood up. "You've been spying on us." Sit down, Mark," Lynn interrupted sharply. "You're not under investigation yet." Julia's face hardened. "You're sick." The military-looking man took a step closer. "Mrs. Walker, please refrain from." She cut him off. "I know that stance. You've had training, but you're not law enforcement. Who are you people really?" The man didn't blink, didn't answer. Crowley sighed. "If there are no more questions, the board will proceed with enforcement planning." I shouted, "Enforcement? You mean intimidation?" That's when the power went out. Total blackness. The hum stopped. The air turned still. Then a scream. Short, sharp, and close. Phones lit up the room. People panicked. Chairs scraped against the floor. I grabbed Julia's wrist and pushed toward the back door. It wouldn't budge. Someone had chained it from the outside. Crowley's voice came from the front, eerily calm in the dark. "No one leaves until we restore order." I yelled, "You've lost your mind." Then, a blinding flash. The projector flickered back on, showing a live feed from outside. A drone hovered above the parking lot, its camera pointed straight at the building. Julia whispered, "They're recording us." Crowley said, "For your safety, of course." The crowd erupted. People demanded to leave. One man pounded on the locked door until his hands bled. Another shouted, "This isn't legal." Crowley didn't move. His face glowed in the projector light, blank, unbothered. "This is the price of protection," he said. Then came a distant rumble, like thunder, but sharper. Julia looked at me. "That's not thunder. Coming up, you'll see what that sound really was. But before I tell you, remember this. When a system decides you're the enemy, truth becomes irrelevant." The lights flickered back to life. Half the room was empty. People had vanished. Julia and I were still standing. Crowley looked straight at her and smiled. "We know who you really are, Marshal." My heart stopped. How did he know? And that's when I realized, this wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. Outside, the rumble grew louder. Engines, tires screeching, shadows moving fast. "Mark," Julia whispered, "they're coming for us." And she was right. The rumble outside turned into a roar. Engines, multiple, synchronized. Through the dusty window I saw headlights slicing through the fog. 3 black SUVs screeched to a stop in front of the community center. Doors flew open. Men in full tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn. Their uniforms looked official, dark vests, helmets, police patches. But something about them was off. Too shiny, too new. "Everyone down." One of them shouted. "This is a controlled operation." People hit the floor, screaming. I pulled Julia behind a table. The air was thick with panic. My pulse hammered in my ears. Crowley didn't flinch. He just stood there, calm, like he'd been expecting them. The leader of the fake SWAT marched in. His voice was deep, mechanical through the mask. "Mr. Crowley, per your request, we'll extract the subjects quietly." Extract? My stomach turned cold. Julia whispered, "They're not police. The patches are wrong. No division ID, no state insignia. Crowley smiled faintly. Proceed. The fake SWAT fanned out through the room, grabbing people. Some resisted, shouting. One man got hit with the butt of a rifle. Another was dragged by his collar. I saw Susan, the same neighbor who'd spoken up earlier, screaming as they zip-tied her wrists. I stood. Stop. You can't just. A rifle swung toward me. Sit down. The man barked. Julia rose beside me. Slow, controlled. I said, stand down, she said. Her tone changed. Sharp. Commanding. Trained. The man froze. Ma'am. Who the hell? Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out her badge. The gold glinted under the fluorescent light. **US. Marshal. **. The room fell silent. Even the fake SWAT hesitated. One of them muttered, what the? Julia's voice cut through the chaos. You're impersonating federal officers. That's 10 years minimum. Drop the weapons, now. Crowley's calm cracked for the first time. His face twitched. Julia, you should have stayed retired. I looked at him, shocked. You knew? He sneered. We know everything. You and your husband have been a problem for months. We couldn't risk you exposing the program. What program? I demanded. Crowley gestured to the projector. A new feed appeared. Live footage from dozens of hidden cameras across the neighborhood. Every house, every driveway, every family. Security, he said softly. Total compliance. Julia stepped forward, her badge steady in her hand. You're running illegal surveillance. You're extorting residents. That's racketeering. Crowley's expression hardened. No. Marshal. That's order. Something you people never understood. The fake SWAT started to move again, slowly, tightening the circle. Julia raised her voice. Federal jurisdiction overrides whatever fantasy this is. Drop your gear and walk away. You'll live. The leader tilted his head. Copy that, he said, and through a flashbang, the blast tore the air apart. Light, sound, heat, screams, chaos. I was on the floor, ears ringing. My vision blurred. I could barely see Julia. Just her silhouette crawling toward me. Gunfire erupted. Not lethal. Rubber bullets maybe, but the nose was monstrous. Tables splintered. Windows shattered. I remember Julia shouting something. Maybe my name. And then another explosion outside. The SUV ignited. Flames rose higher than the rooftops. When the smoke cleared, half the SWAT was gone. Running, shouting into radios. The others dropped their weapons and bolted. Crowley vanished. Julia staggered to her feet, coughing. They weren't trained, she said between breaths. They panicked. Amateurs. I looked around at the wreckage. Chairs overturned. Neighbors injured. The smell of burning fuel filling the hall. What the hell was that? She picked up one of the dropped vests. Inside the pocket, a patch, half torn. It read *** Echelon Protection Group. ***, I've heard of them, she muttered. Private contractors, dirty ones. Outside. Sirens finally echoed. Real ones this time. Local police, maybe late, maybe scared. But Julia wasn't relieved. Her face stayed stone. They're not coming to help us, she said. Crowley called them. Wide? What does he want? To erase the evidence. Coming up. You'll see what happens when law meets corruption head-on. When even the bad shit isn't enough. We escaped through the back exit before the police arrived. The sky was glowing orange. Smoke rising over the cul-de-sac. Our home, our quiet, perfect neighborhood, was now war zone. I turned to Julia. Where do we go? She looked at me. Eyes cold. Back home. We end this where it started. I didn't ask what she meant. Deep down, I already knew. Back home. Where every camera watched us. Every light burned to bright. And every neighbor smiled like they knew our secrets. And as we drove toward the flames, one thought kept repeating in my head. If the HOA could summon fake SWAT, what else could they do? The drive back felt endless, though it was barely 10 minutes. The neighborhood looked like a different world now. The perfect lawns turned into silhouettes of fear. Sprinklers still ran, spraying mist over the flicker of blue lights in the distance. Every house had its curtains drawn. Every window glowed with that faint, artificial security hue. The kind that says, * we're watching you *. Julia drove in silence, her hands steady on the wheel. I could see blood on her knuckles, but she didn't seem to notice. They'll regroup, she said finally. Crowley doesn't lose control easily. He'll want to finish this before morning. I swallowed hard. You think they'll come after us again? They already are. When we pulled into our driveway, The motion light didn't turn on. That light had never failed once. Julia noticed too. Cut from the source, she muttered. They've tapped the grid. I scanned the front door. The lock was untouched, but a faint smear of oil lined the doorknob. Someone had been there. Inside, the air felt different. Not just cold. Disturbed. Papers that used to be stacked neatly were scattered across the table. Our family photo had been turned face down. Julia drew her gun. Stay behind me. We moved room by room, clearing each corner like a slow dance of survival. Nothing moved. No sound except the faint hum of electronics. Then, I heard it. A low static from the living room. The TV was on. Black screen. Faint audio crackling. A man's voice emerged through the distortion. You shouldn't have interfered, Marshal. Julia froze. The voice continued. You were supposed to disappear quietly. But now everyone will watch. She muted the TV, took a deep breath, and said, They've linked into our system. Everything we say here is recorded. I whispered, How's that even possible? She gave me a look that said, I didn't want the answer. We went down to the basement, the only place not connected to the HOA's network. Julia opened an old footlocker. Inside were files, photos, and a flash drive wrapped in black tape. I kept copies, she said. Copies of what? She hesitated, then handed me a folder. Inside were contracts, permits, and memos, all tied to **Echelon Protection Group. Payments authorized by the HOA. Sums in the tens of thousands, labeled Community Defense Services. They hired mercenaries, she said. They built their own police. I felt sick. Why'd? What's the point? Julia flipped through more papers. Crowley's turning this neighborhood into a surveillance model. A test city. People move in thinking it's paradise, and they sign away privacy clause after clause. Tested by who? She met my eyes. Private investors. Think tanks. Maybe even federal contracts. He's selling obedience. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator upstairs broke the silence. Then came a new sound. Faint tapping from above. 3 knocks. Slow. Precise. Julia motioned for me to stay quiet. She moved to the basement steps, listening. Another knock. Then a pause. Then 2 more. A code. Someone signaling. She whispered, Get my phone. Before I could reach it, the power cut out again. Total darkness. The hum died. The air went dead. I heard movement upstairs. Light, cautious footsteps. Not rushing, confident. Whoever it was, they knew we were down there. Julie aimed her gun toward the ceiling. Mark, stay behind me. A soft voice called from above, muffled through the floorboards. Julia, it's Crowley. Let's talk. I froze. Julia didn't lower her weapon. We're past talking. He laughed softly. No. You misunderstand. This isn't a threat. It's an offer. She shouted. Step away from my house. But Crowley kept speaking, calm and almost kind. You've seen too much. You know how deep this goes. I can make it disappear. All of it. Walk away, Julia. Forget the files. Forget the footage. I whispered. He's stalling. Yet, she said. He's buying time. Then something clanged outside. Metallic, rhythmic. Julia glanced toward the small basement window. Shadows moved past it. Not one, but several. Mark, she said quietly. They're surrounding the house. I looked at her. We can't fight them. She didn't answer right away. Then she said something I'll never forget. It's not about fighting. It's about proving they exist. Coming up, you'll see the moment when everything we thought we knew about control shattered. She connected the flash drive to her laptop, powered it through a portable generator, and hit play. The screen filled with video feeds, our neighborhood, hundreds of angles, all archived. Footage of residents being followed, recorded, manipulated. HOA meetings stage. Fines pre-decided. Votes fate. Julia hit upload. Crowley's voice, suddenly sharp from upstairs. Julia, don't do this. She shouted back. It's too late. The progress bar crawled to 10%, 20%, 30%. Outside, engines roared again. A drone buzzed near the window. It's like cutting through the dark. The power flickered back for half a second, and I saw Crowley's face through the glass. Pale, furious, desperate. Julia, stop. He yelled. You'll destroy everything. She didn't stop. The upload hit 70%. The house shook. A concussion from somewhere nearby. Maybe another explosion. Maybe something worse. I screamed. Julia, we have to go. Not yet, she shouted. It has to finish. Then to 99%. A flash-out sigh. A crash. The screen went black. For a few heartbeats, nothing. Silence. Smoke. Static. Then the laptop blinked. Upload complete. Julia exhaled. It's out. We both knew what that meant. No going back. I asked, where did you send it? She smiled faintly. Every news station in the state. I wanted to feel relief, but instead, I felt something colder. Inevitability. Because Julia was right. Crowley didn't lose control easily, and now, he had nothing left to lose. As we climbed the basement stairs, the front window shattered. A bullet tore through the frame, missing Julia by inches. I grabbed her and dove for cover. Coming up, you'll see what happens when the truth hits the world. And the world pretends not to see. By dawn, the whole neighborhood looked like a war documentary. Smoke lingered in the air, streetlights flickered, and police tape stretched across lawns that used to host barbecues and birthday parties. Helicopters thumped somewhere far away. Maybe real, maybe not. You couldn't tell anymore. We'd spent the night hiding in our car, parked 2 blocks down. Julia hadn't slept. Her eyes were fixed on her phone, waiting for confirmation that the upload had actually gone live. At 5:17 a.m., the notification came. Asterisk breaking news. Secret HOA surveillance program exposed. Asterisk I thought that meant we'd won. But the comments came first, then the doubt. This can't be real. Looks fake. I generated. Typical conspiracy garbage. The footage was too shocking for anyone to believe. Every major outlet started investigating, but none of them published the names. Not Crowley's. Not Echelon's. Not even ours. Julia whispered. They're controlling the story. Can they do that? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. By 8 a.m., unmarked sedans rolled through the neighborhood again. Tinted windows, government plates. The news van stayed at the perimeter, filming from a safe distance, but never crossing the line. That invisible line between truth and permission. I saw Crowley standing by the HOA sign, calm as ever, giving a statement to reporters. His voice echoed faintly from the car's radio. There was a minor misunderstanding during last night's safety drill. Some residents overreacted. The HOA remains committed to the protection and privacy of our community. Julia slammed her fist into the dashboard. He turned it into PR. I looked at her. So what now? She stared out the windshield. Now, we make him pay. But pay how? We couldn't even prove it was real anymore. The files, the videos, they were being scrubbed online. Servers flagged them as malicious. The algorithm buried every copy. The truth was dissolving in real time. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Just one sentence. Asterisk asterisk you shouldn't have gone public. Asterisk asterisk she showed it to me. My stomach dropped. Trace it, I said. She did. The signal bounced through proxies, encrypted routes, but the origin was close. Inside our own neighborhood. We're being hunted, she said flatly. We left the car, moving on foot through side streets. Every house we passed looked normal, to normal, curtains still, lights off. But I could asterisk feel asterisk the eyes. Cameras hidden in birdhouses, motion sensors disguised as porch lights. The neighborhood wasn't asleep. It was watching. We reached the old maintenance shed near the back fence, the only structure not connected to the HOA's grid. Julia kicked the door open. Inside, dust and rusted tools. We made it our base. She opened her laptop again. We have one chance left. If we can find Crowley's personal server, we can expose the command chain. It'll link him directly to Echelon. I asked, where is it? She looked up, eyes narrowing. The clubhouse. The clubhouse. The same building where the meeting happened. Now sealed off and guarded by men in dark polos pretending to be security. I said, that's suicide. Julia smiled grimly. Then it's perfect. Coming up, you'll see what happens when we break into the heart of the system itself. We waited until nightfall. The HOA's nightly curfew had started, a rule no one had voted for but everyone obeyed. Patrol drones moved in slow arcs above the streets. Every few minutes, one of them paused midair, as if sniffing for movement. Julia timed their rotations like clockwork. 12-second blind spot between pauses, she whispered. Move then. We crawled across lawns, staying low. My heart pounded so loud I swore they could hear it. When we reached the clubhouse fence, Julia cut the lock with bolt cutters she'd stashed earlier. Inside, Everything smelled of bleach and plastic. The hall was empty. Too empty. A perfect trap. We crept toward the back room, where the servers hummed. The blue glow illuminated racks of equipment, cameras, routers, drives, all labeled with numbers, not names. Julia connected her device and started copying files. This is it. Every camera feed, every transaction, every message. This is their brain. Then a voice behind us. Impressive. Marshal. Crowley. He stepped out from the shadows, calm, unarmed, wearing the same press shirt he'd worn during his press statement. You just couldn't let it go, could you? Julia didn't turn. Funny thing about justice, she said. It doesn't care what you think. He smiled. You think this is justice. You're just another pawn. The program doesn't end with me. It never does. I moved to block him from getting closer. You're finished, Crowley. He laughed softly. No. Mark, you are. Then the lights cut out again. Total darkness. Footsteps. Multiple. Closing in from both sides. The fake SWAT, or what was left of them. Julia grabbed the hard drive, shoved it into her jacket, and yelled, "Run!" We bolted through the side door as bullets tore into the walls. Sparks. Shards of plastic. I felt one graze my shoulder. Hot, sharp pain. But I kept moving. Outside, the drone spotted us. Red beams tracked our bodies across the field. Julia shot one down. Perfect aim. The drone spun, crashed, exploded in a spray of sparks. We dove into a drainage tunnel beneath the fence. The water was cold, filthy, but it hit us. Julia, I shouted. The files. She clutched her jacket. Got them. For a moment, I almost smiled. Then her face changed, eyes wide. I turned. Behind us, a red laser dot moving slowly across the tunnel wall. Mark, she started, but the shot came before she could finish. Everything went white. Coming up, you'll see what happens when even survival becomes another form of control. I never thought a single sound could steal the world from under you. I heard it like a clean note, a small crack, then the tunnel filled with light. Pain hit like a freight train. White, hot, everywhere. I saw Julia's face. It was close, too close. Blood bloomed on her shirt like a dark star. My name's Mark. I say it now because I need you to remember who is telling this. I am the one who was there when everything broke. I am the one who failed to stop it. Say my name if you need a place to put your anger. I grabbed her. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't feel the wound. She coughed once. It sounded like glass. Her eyes were open. They were angry and surprised and so alive. Mark, she whispered. Don't. A second shot cracked. It hit the metal tunnel wall and sent sparks flying. The light from the flare painted her face. For a second, she looked like some unreal thing, hero and ordinary woman at once. She smiled, and it broke me. Stay with me, I begged. My voice was raw. My throat burned. I had so many questions left. Help is coming. Hold on. She laughed once. It was half a sob. You idiot, she said. You always think someone will save us. I tried to crawl. My knee hit the water. Cold. Filthy. It soaked into my jeans. I could taste oil and metal and the sharp copper of panic. My phone was gone. The hard drive bulged in her jacket pocket like a heart. I ripped it out and pressed it to her wound. Because what else do you do when everyone you love is bleeding? Mark, she hissed through the pain. Listen. I leaned so close my forehead touched hers. The world narrowed to her breath. What? I choked. Promise me one thing. Her fingers found my collar, weak but sure. Promise me you won't become what they are. I wanted to promise her everything. I wanted to promise I'd bring them down, that I'd carry the files to someone who would act, that I'd make Crowley kneel. But the promise that left my mouth was stupid and small. I promise. Her hand loosened. Her eyes went somewhere I couldn't follow. She smiled like someone who understood endings. Then she was quiet. The world around me sped up. I heard voices. Men shouting orders. Footsteps pounding above. A boot slammed into the tunnel mouth. Light poured in. They pulled me out. Hands grabbed my arms. Rough, unforgiving. One of them, Crowley's man, clipped the side of my head and I saw stars. Enough, he said. Marshal or not, this ends now. My name's Mark. I was dragged to my feet like a criminal. My clothes were sticky with blood. I could feel every splash on my skin. They shoved me into the back of a van. The hard drive was gone. Julia was gone. I screamed for her. I begged. Nobody answered. They drove fast. The city light smeared into a smear of orange and white. I banged against the metal walls until my hands bled. I wanted to die. I wanted to stop the pain of not knowing. Every minute stretched like a rope around my neck. Inside the van, a man with cold eyes leaned forward. "You should have stopped your wife," he said. "She was reckless." He didn't hide his contempt. "People like her ruin good things." I spat on him. My spit tasted like grit. "Where is she?" I demanded. "What did you do?" He shrugged. "She caused damage. She endangered lives. She will be dealt with." Dealt with. The ways to say murder without the word. I understood what he meant. My chest went hollow. For a second I saw the tunnel again, her face in the flare, her breath leaving. I remembered every small thing, the way she tucked hair behind her ear, the angry scrawl of her handwriting on grocery lists, her crooked smile. I wanted to go back in time one stupid second and stop the whole damn chain. We stopped at a house I recognized. Not ours. Not a safe place. Crowley's voice met me at the door. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had no idea what truly scared him. "You did well," he said. False sympathy dripping from every word. "You should have hidden. You should have let us deal with the leaks." My knees buckled. I had nothing left. I wanted to collapse. Instead I sat at the table he'd used for every polite smile and rational lie. He poured coffee. His hands were steady. That alone made me want to tear the world apart. "We can make this go away," he said. "If you help us, if you stop digging." I laughed. It came out like someone else's sound. "Help you?" After this, he leaned in. "You can be useful, Mark. You have a face people like. You can speak. Help us control the narrative. Tell them the files were fake. Tell them your wife." He stopped. He looked at me like he expected me to beg. "My name's Mark." I didn't beg. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to pick him up and smash his head against the table until the smile left his face forever. But Julia's last request echoed in my ears. "Don't become what they are." I had to decide. I walked away from the table. I left the coffee steaming in his hands. He watched me go with a smile that wanted to be victory. I didn't give it to him. I sat in the back of the van and thought about the files, about the upload, about the lie between truth and lies. Outside, the world kept moving. People went to work. Kids rode bikes past the burn marks on lawns. The news cycle churned like a hungry beast. Expert says footage doctored. HOA claims safety measures. No arrests yet. The headlines were shallow and cruel. I spent that day in a cell in the back of the van. They called it holding. They did not call it kindness. They offered me water and lies. Once, a guard unlocked the door and looked at me like I was already dead. He spat on the ground and said, "You had your chance." I had my chance. I had a million chances. I failed one of them. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the silence afterward. A silence that grows heavy with accusation. Every time a car passed, I thought it might be her. I would shout until my throat burned. I would press my face to the metal and listen for footsteps. Nothing. Only engines and the distant hollow sound of life that goes on. My name's Mark. I say it now because if you forget me, then nothing that happened will have a witness. If you forget, then they win by default. Remember me. Remember Julia. Remember the way the light on her badge caught in the hall and made a small sun. Coming up, you'll see how the public reacts. You'll see the smear campaigns. You'll see who stands with us and who turns away. You'll see a world that pretends a woman didn't die. But before that, there's something you need to know. There was one small mercy. When they took me to a safe house, I found a note in my pocket. It was folded, edges soft with handling. Inside, one line, a phone number, and a name. *** Sierra. You didn't lose this alone. *** Hope is a dangerous thing. It can be a rope. It can be a trap. It can be what saves you. I clung to it like a man drowning. The van stopped. The door opened. Light hit my face. Heads turned. Crowley's men moved like wolves. The world tightened. They led me into a room with cameras. "Smile," a voice said. "You're about to make a statement." I looked straight into the lens. The red dot blinked. It burned into my eyes. I felt the weight of every face that would watch this later. The cameras waited like vultures. "My name's Mark." I breathed in. I thought about Julia, about her last request, about promises, about revenge that would never be enough. I walked to the microphone. They told me what to say. The footage was fabricated. They coached. It was malicious. "We regret the chaos." My mouth formed the shapes. The words were empty shells. But they would air. and people would believe them. I could have lied. I could have saved myself from the next beat of pain. I could have been quiet and lived. I could have kept my wife's memory to her. Instead, as the camera rolled, I looked at the lens until it felt like it would crack. I remembered the flare in the tunnel. I remembered the way her fingers clutched mine. I remembered the promise. I took a breath and said something they did not script. My voice shook. They are lying. The feed cut. Men grabbed me. Chairs scraped. A fist hit the side of my head. Pain exploded. I tasted iron, but I held on. I had to. Coming up, you'll see the fallout from that lie. You'll see the price of speaking the truth when everyone else wants silence. You'll see alliances form from the most unlikely places. They dragged me away. The room emptied. The camera kept rolling for a second longer, then stopped. Outside, a siren wailed. Or maybe that was in my head. I didn't know where Julia's body was. I didn't know who ate her. I didn't know if anyone would look for her. I only knew one thing for certain. Crowley had underestimated how loud one person can be when they finally decide not to be quiet. And the question that burned brighter than any flare was this: how many lives would they take to bury what we had exposed? They thought killing the story would stop us. They were wrong. My name's Mark. Say it when you need someone who was there. I sat in a dim room for hours after the broadcast, bruised and broken, counting the beats between breaths. The note in my pocket, Sierra's name and number, pulsed like a lifeline. I called it with fingers that still shook. The voice that answered was low and steady. You called at the right time, she said. I know what you carried. She met me in a coffee shop that smelled of burnt beans and old paper. She wore a hoodie that hid half her face and eyes like a hawk. She didn't look like a hero. She looked like someone who had survived things nobody should survive and learned to be useful, because it kept them alive. My name's Mark, I said again, because names bind truth to memory. She nodded like she already knew me from the files, because she did. Sierra had a network, former reporters, an ex-IT guide who'd been fired for asking too many questions, a neighbor who worked nights at a TV station, and one quiet woman who used to run the HOA minutes but had been pushed out when she refused to sign an illegal contract. Sierra moved fast. You have one thing they want proof. I have one thing you need reach. But you can't go back to the normal channels. They control those. She slid a thumb drive across the table. This is a burner. We'll move the files through channels they can't touch. We'll feed them to the right people. Inside, my chest shook. I remembered Julia's laugh, her eyes narrowing when she parsed a legal memo. I remembered the promise. They have my wife, I said. Sierra didn't flinch. We'll find her. But first we make it impossible for them to bury what's left. She pulled out a map of the neighborhood, pins and red yarn like a conspiracy board. Crowley's reach is deep. He's got contractors, fake SWAT, rent-a-cops, a lawyer who can freeze accounts, but he's sloppy. At the edges, pride makes men sloppy. People he thinks are beneath him resent being used. My name's Mark. I repeated it, because I needed to own the next steps. We mapped who might still be on our side. There was Luis, the low-voltage tech who'd installed half the cameras. He'd been late the night of the meeting and had an alibi no one noticed. There was Carmen, the woman who organized charity drives but had been fined for planting the wrong flowers. Fines cut her small business. There was an old board member, Henderson, pushed out this year, who still had keys and grudges. We moved like survivors, quietly, in pairs. At dawn and dusk, when the neighborhood shifted between sleep and watchfulness, Sierra taught me how to look ordinary, how to let surveillance pass without flinching, how to record with small things, a lighter camera, a glove, an audio app on a hack smartwatch. They see what they want to see, she said. Make them look at what they don't want to see. My name's Mark. I say it again because every few minutes I remind myself who's speaking. It keeps me tethered to the person who loved Julie and who promised not to become what they are. We contacted an independent journalist, Bennett, who had a history of biting powers that be. He didn't blink when I told him the story. Instead, he asked one question: can you prove it without Julia? I wanted to answer with everything, but I couldn't. The hard drive was gone. But we had other threads. Encrypted emails between Echelon and Crowley, invoices with coded descriptions, deposit records that tie back to shell companies. Sierra had ways of making the invisible visible. We hit small wins. We exposed one contractor, a low-level manager, whose ledger showed payments from the HOA for emergency response training. He flipped when we threatened anonymity. He gave us badge photos, names, phone numbers. We traced 2 of the fake SWAT back to a P.O. box. We leaked a black and white photo of Crowley meeting men in suits, a picture small enough to survive algorithmic takedowns. Social media was a war zone. Every post we seeded was attacked by a pattern of bots and disinformation. Staged, they wrote, paid actors, but every time they called us liars, we responded with something harder to erase: names, dank routing numbers, dates. We forced local small outlets to run correction pieces. We created friction in the story. Small doubts grow like cracks in concrete. My name's Mark. I remind you again, when I speak, I am the witness. We also found allies in the most unlikely places. Mrs. Patel, who used to bake cookies for board meetings, admitted in a whisper that she'd been recording audio of Crowley's private calls for months because he scored political favors. A kid from down the street, Liam, used to fix drones for the HOA's night patrols. He ended us flight logs and video clips he'd found on a hard drive. Even Henderson, the disgraced board member, gave us access to the clubhouse office and told us where Crowley kept his receipts. But the more we pushed, the louder the backlash. Our cars were keyed at night. Strange cars followed us when we attended public hearings. Someone sent a package to the maintenance shed, a jar with a clear note: "Stop or this is what happens next." The threats were coded, but the meaning was clear. One night, we planted audio recorders in the clubhouse fence. We slipped away as the HOA held a safety briefing. The recorders picked up fragments, discussions of making an example, references to legal containment, and a quiet voice, Crowley, saying, if necessary, make them disappear quietly. The tape was gold. It was the kind of human voice that could cut through algorithms and denials. We fed pieces of the tape to Bennett, who ran a slow burn series. The first article was cautious, facts first, no accusations, but it had new details: invoices, a drone log, a contractor list. The next day, a man who'd been on the fringes of the HOA board stepped forward with a notarized letter. The tone shifted. Local officials could no longer say, with a straight face, that nothing was happening. Crowley reacted the way predators do when they feel the net tighten, with violence and PR. They staged a counter-narrative, a community safety campaign, full of smiling faces and testimonials from people who'd been paid to speak. They called the police repeatedly, reporting us for trespass and harassment. 2 of our allies were arrested on trumped-up charges the same week. We watched the criminal justice system being used like a blunt instrument. My name's Mark. I say it so you don't forget who this is about. When one of our people, Luis, was taken in the middle of the night, we went to his house and found the front door kicked in, the safe empty, the cameras smashed. The message was clear. They could get to anyone, but the resistance hardened. Each attack made us smarter. We moved to analog backups, printed lists, hard copies. When online files vanished, our paper trail remained. We put copies in safety deposit boxes across 3 counties. We gave sealed packets to trusted lawyers and an off-the-grid broadcaster Sierra trusted. We set contingencies. If we die, the packets went live. Still, there was a cost. I barely slept. My voice was hoarse from shouting in crowded rooms. My hands shook when I held a pen. Every time someone on our side was dragged away, I replayed Julia's last breath. The ugliness of it could eat a man alive. I felt the pull, rage, the desire to smash and burn. But Sierra kept reminding me of the promise. Don't become them, she said. It was a restraint and a razor. Coming up, you'll see how the pressure we built forces Crowley's allies to crack. You'll see secrets spill in ways we didn't plan, but you'll also see how cheap men fight when their world collapses. Who can you trust when every face is lit by surveillance? Who will step forward when the cameras stare back? And the question that stopped us cold one night: who had the authority to send real law enforcement into our neighborhood? And would they come before it was too late? The calls finally came from the kinds of places we'd hoped would never get involved. My name's Mark. Repeat it when you need an anchor. This part of the story is the slow fold of a map opening under too many fingers. It's the public part, where secrets meet light and men in suits decide whether to act or to fold. It's the part where Crowley learned that his insurance policy had limits. 2 weeks after the van, the first councilman issued a statement. We are launching an independent inquiry. Small words, big promise. Local TV ran them in a loop. The anchor's tone was careful, practiced. The story had traction. Bennett's pieces had done damage. Even the algorithms that buried raw footage couldn't hide the paper trails we'd planted. Sierra's contacts in the state auditor's office called in favors. A county prosecutor who owed a favor to a reporter from years back opened a file. It wasn't enough to topple Crowley, but it was enough to make him look like a man under a microscope. My name's Mark. Say it now to remember who tells this. For the first time in days, I slept without waiting for a boot at the door. That night was short and 2/3 nervous. We had allies. We had no's. We had people asking questions. Crowley's first response was the predictable legal avalanche. Lawyers in dark suits arrived at board meetings. They sent cease and desist letters to outlets running our leaks. They threatened suits. You will pay. One lawyer wrote to Bennett's newsroom. That threat was supposed to be a club. It was a message to anyone thinking of helping us. Back off, or drown under legal fees. But Bennett and the little independent station he'd worked with were the sort who'd been hungry for this kind of story all their careers. They pushed. The state auditor quietly requested HOA financials. The first audit revealed anomalies. Payments routed through shell entities. Funds moved in patterns that screamed laundering. The accounting trails were messy because Crowley had been sloppy, or because he felt untouchable. In the middle of that week, a sting went wrong. We had a contact inside Echelon, not a soldier, but a clerk who handled petty invoices. He was supposed to help by leaking contract IDs. Instead, he was picked up at a diner. The footage of his arrest appeared on the same networks that ran Crowley's smiling interviews. Criminal element disrupts peaceful community. The caption read, the clerk was found later with a broken jaw and a blackened eye. He didn't talk. My name's Mark. I use it like a metronome to keep time with the story because the rhythm of memory is the only thing that keeps me sane. As we pushed, the violence became a game of escalation. Crowley hired more muscle. Unknown men watched Sierra's safe house from a distance. Our allies were threatened in front of their kids. Henderson's car was torched. We buried messages in public records and left copies with friends in other states who could not be easily erased. Coming up, you'll see the raid that finally changed the tenor of this fight. But first, know this. When a system has the machinery to censor a story, exposure isn't a single act. It's many small cuts that eventually leave a mark. On a wet Thursday, state investigators showed up at the clubhouse with warrants. They moved like a clean, trained team, warrants in hand. Flashbangs nowhere in sight. Crowley's men tried to block them. There were shouts, the muffled scrambling of phones. The cameras in the parking lot recorded everything. For the first time, the HOA's security that had been used to intimidate residents faced the law. They could not hide behind a polished press release. I watched the live feed with Sierra and 3 others in empty storage room. The kind of place whose dust tastes like secrecy. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. We'd planted a tracker on one of Crowley's vans weeks earlier. It had led the investigators to a warehouse outside of town. Inside that warehouse were servers, racks and racks labeled with HOA identifiers, and boxes of paperwork that traced money to Echelon and to accounts offshore. Oh my God, Sierra whispered as the feed showed receipts, emails, and photo evidence pinned to the wall like specimens. They did this to everyone. My name's Mark. I say it for the kids who will ask why their parents fought. I say it because someone needs to remember the human shape of the story. The investigators found more than bank records. They found physical evidence of intimidation, fake IDs, uniforms, burnable material for stage explosions, and a dossier on dozens of residents with notes on how to manipulate them. The smell of Olan power had been stripped from these things and replaced by the sterile scent of forensic teams. Crowley's face, as seen on the feeds, was the face of a man who had been certain himself untouchable. He tried to smile for the cameras when questioned. He tried the old defense. This was for safety. Then the audio cuts played back, his recorded conversations, the ones we'd slipped into Bennett's hands, and the words were damning. Make an example, he'd said. We can't have people undermining our model. The prosecutor paused, then read the indictment. It felt like victory, but it was raw and small. An indictment doesn't bring someone back. It doesn't undo the bullet in a tunnel. It doesn't give a name back to a wife. But it did something worse for Crowley. It made him real in a new way. He had to step out from behind his smile and answer for his actions in public. The local papers ran front pages with old-fashioned headlines. People we hadn't spoken to in weeks started leaving flowers at the clubhouse gate. Mrs. Patel cried openly on camera, and the camera didn't cut away. In small actions, something shifted. The neighborhood stopped being a uniform of obedience for a few hours, and looked like a place full of complicated, angry people. But the reckoning was not a clean arc to justice. The machine fought back. Echelon lawyers filed injunctions. Crowley's allies in local government released data suggesting the investigators were overreaching. A conservative talk show spun the story into a national conspiracy about overzealous federal interference. Someone we never learned who released a deep-fake video of me, supposedly confessing to staging the entire scandal. It trended. The laughter returned, thin and cruel. The narrative war was brutal because it ran on outrage and doubt, and the ways the mind wants easy answers. My name's Mark. I remind you again because every few minutes of this story I will do that. It's how I survived the smear. The deepfake made people look away. Some neighbors changed their locks. Some divorced partners. Some employers quietly cut ties with people who had spoken out. The whole thing had the feel of a small town collapsing inward. Then something else happened. A federal oversight committee put out a brief statement that started a chain reaction. Allegations under review, if proven, will be subject to federal criminal investigation. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division opened a file. That announcement made Chicago and New York and national media begin to look at the story, not as a small HOA problem, but as a test case for private surveillance's reach. A senator mentioned the case during a hearing, and suddenly, the files we'd thought would be buried had a replay button. Coming up, you'll see Crowley's last desperate move. You'll see how desperate men try to burn what they cannot hold. You'll see the choice he makes when the law closes in. Crowley responded with theatrics. He produced a staged admissions video of residents praising the HOA, a town hall full of actors he'd paid, and declarations of community unity. The optics team he'd hired tried to drown out the prosecutor's slow, procedural work with no's. It almost worked, but the audit team had already cataloged the money trail. For every influencer he bought, we had a ledger entry. For every actor on that stage, we had a receipt. The final act before the courtroom was a private meeting between Crowley and his backers in a hotel room where the smoke tasted like cheap bourbon and false bravado. Someone suggested fleeing. Someone else whispered about a quiet disappearance. Crowley looked to the window and shrugged. "We built the world they want," he said. "If it burns, we rebuild it elsewhere." My name's Mark. I say it again here because, when the flames licked the edges of this story, remember who spoke up. The prosecutors drafted charges: conspiracy, extortion, racketeering, and several counts tied to the fake SWAT impersonations and physical intimidation. Echelon was subpoenaed. The board was dissolved. But the wheels of justice are slow, and some of the men who executed the dirty work were still on the street. On the night before the first hearing, our safe houses multiply. Sierra moved her people. Bennett prepared litigation-ready copies of everything. I sat on the roof of an abandoned building watching the neighborhood sleep, and thinking about the arithmetic of risk. The case would hum for months in court. People would testify. Depositions would produce more names. Some men would go to jail. Others would keep their money and buy new towns to terrorize. Coming up, you'll see the courtroom and the unexpected turn that makes the case sear into public memory. A single witness refuses to be erased. But for now, remember the feel of the police tape and the smell of burned-out SUVs. The way a neighborhood's gloss peels away when light hits it hard. Remember how small actions, a leaked invoice, a burned drone, a neighbor who kept the secret audio, dilled a ladder out of a trench. The reckoning had started. It was imperfect. It was messy. It was human. It had teeth. But it did not mean the end. Who would speak next in court? Who would stand and tell the truth? And would the truth be enough to bring back what was taken? The courtroom smelled like polished wood and tension. My name's Mark. Say it aloud in your mind. You need it as an anchor, because what happens here is the next layer of chaos wrapped in order. The prosecutor walked in like a predator in a tailored suit. Crowley sat across the aisle, flanked by a fortress of lawyers who smiled like sharks under fluorescent lights. Cameras clicked and whirred, recording every twitch, every flicker of fear or arrogance. The stakes were no longer just money or power. This was about control, accountability, and whether a neighborhood could reclaim its soul. The first witness was Mrs. Patel, still clutching her scarf, eyes wide but steady. "I saw him," she said, voice trembling, standing there, counting cash, making threats to everyone who questioned him. The defense tried to shake her, implying confusion, misremembering, exaggeration, but she repeated every detail with precision. a human ledger of courage. The room felt small, the walls pressing in as each testimony landed like a stone thrown into a still pond. The echoes would ripple for weeks. Coming up, the next witness is someone unexpected, someone who could change the entire narrative. And you'll want to know why every decision Crowley made before the trial is now backfiring. The tension in the room is palpable. Every reporter present senses it. Every camera lens captures it. Every juror shifts in their seat, aware that this isn't just a case. It's a story about power, fear, and the price of silence. The next morning, the unexpected witness arrived, a former enforcer, one of Crowley's own men. He stepped up, head down, face shadowed under the courtroom lights. "My name's Mark. I remind you because the witness's words will resonate, and someone has to narrate the chaos. I did things. I followed orders," he confessed. His voice cracked, shaking the entire room. "I don't want anyone else hurt. He's dangerous." Every syllable landed like a hammer blow. Crowley's stoic mask wavered for a fraction of a second. The jurors leaned forward. The air was thick with anticipation. Coming up, the next testimony could shatter everything Crowley thought he controlled. Over the following days, more evidence surfaced. Emails, bank statements, security footage from neighbors' cameras. Each piece was like a nail in the coffin of the facade Crowley had built. The prosecutor meticulously laid out the trail of intimidation, money laundering, and harassment. Every invoice, every email, every transaction. "It paints a picture," they said. And it did. A picture of corruption that was both banal and monstrous. "My name's Mark." Repeat it, because the next witness's statement will be the one everyone remembers. Then came the twist no one expected. A video recording of Crowley himself from a year prior, casually discussing plans to silence dissenters and manipulate HOA elections. The courtroom gasped. The defense tried to discredit it, but the metadata and timestamps were irrefutable. Crowley's lawyers began to sweat under the pressure of irrefutable proof. Every move, every strategy he had banked on, collapsed under scrutiny. As the trial pressed on, emotional testimonies blended with technical evidence. Neighbors cried recounting late-night threats, families testified about intimidation tactics, and financial experts broke down complex schemes into something undeniable. Each day ended with the question hanging in the air: how far would someone go to maintain control? Coming up, the final days of the trial will reveal unexpected betrayals, desperate acts, and a moment that changes the verdict before it's even announced. The climax of the trial approached like a storm. Crowley's own lawyer turned on him in a final, shocking statement, revealing withheld evidence and internal conflicts. The courtroom erupted. Crowley's smug confidence shattered, replaced by panic and fury. "My name's Mark. I remind you again because the next twist is pivotal. The moment when power meets its reckoning." On the final day, the jury deliberated. Every second stretched into eternity. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed, neighbors watched with bated breath, and the landscape of the neighborhood itself seemed to hold its breath. The verdict, when it came, would not just decide a man's fate, it would define the limits of fear, greed, and courage. Coming up, the verdict, the fall, the aftermath, and the truth about what it cost to stand up, speak out, and survive in a place where power had always seemed untouchable. But before that, remember the witnesses, the emails, the hidden cameras, and the human cost. Because the final moments will show what happens when all lies meet daylight. Who would speak last in court? Who would have the courage to face Crowley's wrath one final time? And what consequences would ripple beyond the courtroom walls, touching everyone who dared to stand up? The courtroom emptied. Silence pressed against the walls. "My name is Mark. Say it in your head. It keeps you grounded." The verdict had been delivered. Relief? Not yet. Fear? Always. The weight of what happened settled like dust. The papers, the cameras, the gavel, everything faded into background noise. My hands were shaking. I barely noticed the crowd outside. Faces blurred. Some smiled, some cried. All whispered rumors I didn't care to hear. I walked alone through the hallway. Echoes of footsteps bounced against cold tiles. Every step reminded me of choices made. Every choice, a fracture in life's fragile glass. I remembered the HOA meetings, the threats, the fake SWAT, my wife's badge, that flash of authority, that moment everything flipped. And still, the consequences weren't over. Coming up, you'll see what happens when control slips, when power meets unpredictability, when silence ends. I stepped outside. Sunlight felt harsh, Wind tore through my hair. Neighbors stared. Cameras flashed. The air smelled of gasoline, or maybe just fear. My reflection in the glass of a car caught my eye. I looked older, tired, hardened, and yet something alive burned inside. Rage, relief, maybe both. Coming up, the final moment that changes everything. You won't see it coming. No one will. I found a quiet corner near the street. A bench, empty. I sat, thought, reflected. How did it come to this? I whispered to myself. The trials, the chaos, the choices, was it worth it? Was justice served? Or had I just survived a bigger lie? My mind raced through every scene, every threat, every face. I could see it all. Sharp, brutal, beautiful in a strange, awful way. Life had a rhythm now. Cold, precise, and terrifying. The calm before the storm. Suddenly, a sound. Sharp, mechanical, unexpected. Not a car, not a scream. Something different. I turned. Shadows stretched across the pavement. My heart raced. Time slowed. My pulse was deafening. The street, the neighbors, the cameras frozen in place. My reflection fractured in the window again. Something moved behind me. I didn't see it clearly, but I felt it. Coming up, nothing will ever be the same. I whispered aloud. This is it, isn't it? The words trembled. The wind carried them away. The shadows shifted again. And then silence. My chest tight. My legs rooted to the ground. A sudden impact. Or a sound swallowed by the world. I couldn't tell, but everything changed. The sky, the street, my perception, the rules of what I knew gone. My reflection shattered. Everything froze. Then, nothing. The last thing I saw before the scene collapsed into blackness was the badge in my wife's hand, flashing, brief, defiant, and a figure, unknown, moving through the street. I blinked, tried to comprehend, but comprehension wasn't granted. Not here, not now. The world tilted, and then cut, and the story didn't explain. It only left questions, fear, awe, and one undeniable truth. Life had shifted irreversibly. Who survived? Who didn't? Who was coming next? That no one could answer.